This is Hiroshima, Japan. Millions of visitors come here every year. It's a modern city with a deeply haunted past. 80 years ago, in 1945, this was the setting for one of the final and most famous acts of World War II. Since Japan began the war in the Asia-Pacific, millions of people had been killed. After years of conflict, Japan had lost its territorial gains. Defeat was certain, yet they refused to surrender.
Only surrender can prevent the kind of ruin which they have seen come to Germany as a result of continued useless resistance.
Japan had its choice, complete surrender or complete ruin.
Over 5 months, the US attacked their home islands by land, sea, and air.
もう生まれた時からです。日本は僕は戦争が一番大切、天皇陛下が一番大切、私がないんですよ。戦時色一色。
The Japanese had absolutely no chance of defeating America, but their political surrender was quite a different matter.
Today, only a few survivors remain. Their memories of the final few months of the war are still strong.
Why we had such cruel experience? Everywhere people are dying.
日本国民は天皇陛下のために全部死ねって言われた。政府の取るのは基本的な姿勢は棄民、わかります？民衆を捨てる責任も何も持ってません。
It's now 80 years since Japan surrendered, bringing the Second World War to a close. The country today is vastly different to what it once was, with its unique brand of pacifism. But Japan is still accused of failing to accept responsibility for the horrors it caused, including the needless harm its own people suffered by not surrendering sooner. Those few survivors alive know their time is running out, and they're determined to make sure their stories don't die with them.
de で私は父の顔を知らない。殺されちゃうわけですよ。戦死しちゃう。だから戦争というのは私は威勢いいもんじゃなくて死ぬところだっていうふうに子供の時から思ってた。
Yoshikazu Hamada is 88 and lives alone in Tokyo's outer suburbs.
ご苦労様、お願いしますね。
He was 7 when in March 1945, the US launched the most destructive firebombing raid ever seen in human history.
まずね、夜のね10時頃警戒区で寝てたら途端にねバーッと明るくなったんですよ、お庭がね。ものすごいでかい飛行機とその飛行機が来るとバラバラバラと焼夷弾を落とすわけですよ。花火みたいにバーッと散るわけ。 周り全体が白海ですからね。たらね、おふくろがね、でっかい声で「清洲みてえに逃げるんだよ、清洲みてえんだよ」って叫んでました。
In the middle of the night, Kiyosumi Garden in central Tokyo became a refuge for Yoshikazu, his family, and many others fleeing the fires.
まず思い出すのは母の顔とかおばあちゃんの顔、その時の。で、必死になってですね、私を守ろうとした。だから水をかけてくれたり。
It was the first time America bombed the city's civilian areas. In one night, swathes of Tokyo would be obliterated.
なんかね、まだ焼け跡でしょ、周りが。1週間経ち1ヶ月経ち腐ってくるともう耐えられない。
100,000 civilians were killed, a million more made homeless.
もう人間の尊厳も何にも誇りも何にもないですよ。もう黒焦げの死体ですよ。
Nobuaki Muraoka was also at the park that night.
これは3月10日の日の清澄庭園です。もうまさに地獄ですよ。それでこれは火の粉がこの一つ一つですね、頭の大きさぐらいあるんですよ。この辺にはたくさんの死体がずっと類々とつながっていた。翌日の朝から書きました。3月10日の朝から生々しい記憶からどんどん書いてきましたね。優位にですね、オレンジ色の中に包まれた、今そのオレンジの色まで覚えてるんですよ。そして息を吸う時はですね、こうして息を吸うとみんな死んじゃうんですよ、熱風で。
The fires just swept through these districts like it was a giant box of matches.
Mordecai Sheftall is an American academic who has dedicated his life to understanding Japan's involvement in the war.
I've been here since 1987. People talked about the war, but on a very strictly personal basis. Like, I was in Tokyo when it was firebombed, or my brother died in the Philippines, or things like this. But people didn't ask the big why questions, right? Why were we in that war? Why did that happen to us? Who was responsible?
The Tokyo firebombing, he says, marked a dramatic shift in strategy against Japan.
They were targeting the industrial areas of eastern Tokyo, figuring that if large numbers of Japanese factory workers were rendered homeless, they would not be up to the task of showing up to work every day.
Today, there's little left of the old Tokyo. The wooden homes that once lined the waterways, now a distant memory. Inside this memorial hall, behind lock and key, is an extraordinary resting place. It took authorities 3 years to collect the remains of those who perished in the Tokyo firebombing. Now, the ashes of about 100,000 people are stored in this room, each urn 200 to 300 people, and the grim reality is only a small number of them have been identified. Nobuaki Muraoka is now 93. His greatest wish is for the events of that night never to be forgotten.
もう終わりの終着駅が見えてる。だからあと何枚書けるかっていうのが本当の気持ちですね。
He fears the Japanese government will never apologise.
私は求めますね。だけど政府は知らん顔です。聞く耳持たないです。で戦争に対して振り返るという意識もないんです。日本政府が待っているのはみんな死ぬのを待っているんです。
80 years ago, America hoped the firebombing of Tokyo would hasten Japan's surrender. But the war would rage on for months.
This doctrine of bombing the other guys into surrender was proved to be completely ineffective. So that wasn't enough to drive the Japanese to surrender, not even close. The Americans were already planning for an upcoming invasion of the Japanese home islands, a D-Day sort of operation, but much, much larger. So they needed a large enough island from which they could stage such large-scale operations.
Located to the south of Japan's mainland sits Okinawa. Capturing the island became America's next target. As US warships approached, Japan attacked from the air.
Here on the deck of the Yorktown, we're right in the path of a suicide plane.
Kamikaze fighters on a suicide mission were ordered to take out the US fleet.
During the war, they were the 1945 Japanese equivalent of rock stars. The kamikaze tactic of simply pointing your airplane at your target and flying it into it was something that even a student pilot with only a few hours of stick time could do.
When the Americans arrived on Okinawa's beaches, the Japanese weren't there. Instead, they were hiding in the island's dense jungle and complex cave systems, believing this would be their best bet to defeat the invaders.
Enemy soldiers had to be destroyed cave by cave and one by one.
Japanese men in uniform were prohibited from surrendering. There would be no surrender, and they would fight on to the last man.
Many civilians were also hiding in the caves. They were told the Americans would be crueler than they could ever imagine. The Japanese military left them with little choice: fight for victory or take the honourable option of suicide.
I believe that the Japanese military wanted to remove from the civilian imagination the hope and the possibility of surviving the war. Once that was gone, the only option left would be, if you're going to die, are you going to die well or are you going to die poorly? Dying well would be standing alongside the soldiers and resisting the Western barbarians invading the sacred Japanese territory.
Up to 150,000 Okinawan civilians died, including thousands who killed themselves and their family members.
I don't like to come here. こんなところにたくさん人が死んだから。みんなこんなところで殺されたのよ。
It's taken 86-year-old Kohsei Kyan all his strength to return here. He's one of the last survivors of Okinawa. He was just 6 and the oldest of 4 children when his mother fled to the caves seeking safety. Instead, she was given a cruel choice.
ここに入ろうとしたら、日本兵がいて、泣く子はいらないって銃突きつけるわけ。うちのおふくろはね、ごめんなさい、この上の2人は泣きませんから入れてください、お願いしますって言って。
His mother took his 3-year-old brother and baby sister outside and left them.
3歳の子はね、分かるの。自分たちは置いてけぼりになったら、泣きながら母ちゃん母ちゃんって泣きながら追っかけてる。おふくろはそのユキオって言うんだけど、ユキオを抱っこしてね、また遠いところに連れて行って。
For 80 years, one question has haunted Kohsei.
おふくろはこの2人の子供をさガマの外に岸壁の上から捨てたのかな。おふくろに戦争終わってもそれだけはね聞けなかった。だから戦争10年経っておふくろは39歳で亡くなった。毎晩泣いてたと思う。ごめんね陽子ちゃんゆきおちゃんごめんね毎晩泣いてたと。
To this day, Kohsei remains angry that Okinawans haven't received an apology or compensation, especially because the harm came from Japanese soldiers.
こんちくしようと思うさ。何やったんだお前たちはって。自分の務めを果たさんでさ、なんで沖縄人をね殺すんだ。助けるどころか殺してるんだよって僕は言いたいよ。腹立つよ。
There are many caves in the Okinawan jungle that hide a dark past. Now, 8 decades later, one man has made it his mission to find those who never made it home. Takamatsu Gushiken is a volunteer bone hunter. The 71-year-old spends his weekends looking for the remains of those that died in Okinawa's caves. Takamatsu-san, 今日はありがとうございます。
はい、こちらこそありがとうございます。
He's agreed to take me into the jungle on his latest dig. It's a half-hour march in.
James, this is cave.
It looks more like a giant boulder than a cave, but inside this tiny entry is one of the many hiding places used by Okinawan civilians 80 years ago. Don't squeeze. Oh. It doesn't take long for the past to reveal itself.
I found this skull. This skull is parts of skull of human.
Is that a bullet?
Yeah. This is American M1 carbines.
American M1 carbine. So people are living down here.
Yes.
Very small space to live.
Yes.
Yeah.
And some people die up here. I 私は戦没者の亡くなった方は家族の元へ帰る権利があると思って。
Do you think that there's a lot more people to be discovered in this cave system?
Yes. 中の人たちどうやって亡くなったんだろうかなって。結局全滅したのかねっていうね、女性もいただろうし、もしかしたら子供もいたのか、できるだけたくさん出してあげたいと思います。
By late June, Okinawa was in American hands. Women and children were freed from their hideouts, including 6-year-old Kohsei.
アメリカ兵は外にはエンジェルがいた。壕の中には悪魔がいた。この悪魔が日本兵なのよ。
Back at his office, Takamatsu spends hours identifying each piece. He wants to reunite the remains with their descendants. He's been organising DNA testing, but government help is hard to find.
国にやるべきだっていうことで国がこうはいやりますって言って法律まで作ったのに全然動きもしないでも遺族がいなくなるのを待ってるかのような。
By now, Japan's Axis ally, Germany, had surrendered. On July 26, during a meeting of world leaders in Potsdam, Germany, Japan was issued a final ultimatum.
The message of Japan is surrender or else be bombed into extinction.
Japan still refused. It had no idea what was to come next.
A short time ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima. It is an atomic bomb. It is a harnessing of the basic power of the universe. The force from which the sun draws its power has been loosed against those who brought war to the Far East.
It was a Monday morning when the first atomic bomb wiped out everything within a 1.5 kilometre radius of Hiroshima's city centre. In an instant, 80,000 people were killed.
There was a flash at that moment. Everything I was seeing turned to white, no color at all.
Keiko Ogura had just celebrated her 8th birthday. She was 2.5 kilometres from ground zero.
Everywhere, people were dying. I saw, long line people coming like, ghost or zombie or, skin was peeling off and swollen faces. They said only water, no other words.
For survivors like Keiko, withstanding the blast was just the start. Many had also been exposed to extreme levels of radiation. By the end of the year, the death toll would rise to 140,000.
What made us so scared was people started to die because of radiation. That made us horrified.
The person has to endure rotting like a corpse while they're still alive. Unimaginable suffering, not only for them, but for their loved ones who are having to care for them and watch for them slowly dying under those circumstances. It's the worst thing imaginable.
Even after the destruction of Hiroshima, Japan still wouldn't surrender. 2 days later, the Soviet Union declared war on them. The next day, America dropped a second atomic bomb, this time on the port city of Nagasaki.
The strategy was to do the 1-2 punch and give the idea that there were an unlimited number of bombs.
Despite this, there was still furious division in Japan's War Council about whether to surrender.
The army, who were the ones that were really resisting the surrender to the bitter end, were still holding out for a chance to fight the Allies on Japanese home ground, and believing this bloodletting would finally be enough to get the Allies to agree to a conditional surrender where Japan could avoid occupation.
The vote was a tie. Japan's Emperor Hirohito had the final say. He decided to surrender.
The atomic bombs gave the emperor a rhetorical out. We have no choice but to accept the unacceptable, endure the unendurable, and surrender in the face of these barbarous foes.
On August 15, 6 days after the second atomic attack, Japan announced its surrender.
戦局ならずしも好転せず、世界の体制また我にあらず。
On a US warship in Tokyo Bay, the official papers were signed by Japan's foreign minister.
つかのみならず敵は新たに残虐なる爆弾を使用してしきれに向こうを殺傷し、残骸の及ぶところ真にかかるべからざるに至る。しかもなお応戦を継続せんか、ついに我が民族の滅亡を将来するのみならず、ひいて人類の文明をも棄却すべし。
War was finally over.
The shame that the surrendered detachment members would have felt under those conditions are probably nearly impossible for any person who wasn't a Japanese person in 1945 to imagine. The only saving grace for them in terms of honor was that they knew that they were carrying this out on the wishes of His Majesty. They were performing their duty to the end.
Above that building, about 580 meters above here, exploded in the air, not hit on the ground.
Keiko and other atomic bomb survivors are known as hibakusha. For them, their lifetime of suffering seems so avoidable. A swift surrender would have meant no atomic bombs, no radiation sickness, no mental trauma. It took them decades to win compensation and even a Nobel Peace Prize. But they've never had an apology. Should the Japanese government apologise?
I think so, because so many people died caused by the decision of Japanese government. People's agony and then desperation and so on. So that shouldn't be ignored.
Back in Tokyo, 88-year-old firebombing survivor Yoshikazu Hamada makes the hour-long journey by train to the nation's parliament. Every Thursday, he gathers with a dozen other survivors and supporters to hand out flyers.
ちょっと見てください。空襲のことを子供たちに話してください。ちょっと修学旅行の関係ですよね。だから広島なんかも行くんでしょ、修学旅行で。高校で行ったりしますよね。だからこの東京には大空襲があった。はい、そういうことを子供たちに知ってもらいたいのね。じゃあぜひお持ちになってください。結構ですから。僕承知します。そうですか。よろしくお願いします。で僕はそこにね非常に大きな問題があるというふうに気がつきました。あの子どもたちが本当にそういう勉強をしてもらいたい。今あの子たちが大人になった時にどんな社会になるか心配です。空襲東の会です。どうぞ。
80 years on, modern Japan is a very different place. But some things, it seems, are still too difficult to confront. Why haven't civilians received a special pension or compensation or even an apology?
If the Japanese were to admit or to declare that war had been faulty on some moral level, that would impugn the person of the emperor and the institution of the imperial throne. Even a Japanese politician in 2025 is not quite ready to go there.
We 私たちが求めているものはやっぱり国を治めている政府の人たちの謝罪が欲しいと。それが80年経っちゃったら僕できちゃってそんなこと全然考えない人たちばっかり。